If the doctors are correct in their prognostication, I have only a few Martian hours of life remaining to me. In those hours, I shall endeavor to relate, as a warning to others who might follow in our footsteps, the singular and frightful happenings that terminated our researches among the ruins of Yo Vombis. Somehow, even in my extremity, I shall contrive to tell the story, since there was no one else to do it. But the telling will be toilsome and broken, and after I am done, the madness will recur. And several men will restrain me, lest I should leave the hospital and return across many desert leagues to those abominable vaults beneath the compulsion of the malignant and malevolent virus which is permeating my brain. Perhaps death will release me from that abhorrent control, which would urge me down to the bottomless underworld warrens of terror, for which the saner planets of the solar system can have no analog. I say perhaps, for remembering what I have seen, I am not sure that even death will end my bondage. Clark Ashton Smith, The Dark Eidolon, and Other Fantasies. So welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor and the Sunday Penguin. Now, as I told you last week after I did my fantastic Planet of the Apes video, I said next week I'll choose a more classic-y type of classic, and boy did I not deliver. You see, I was poking around in my Penguin Classics back there, and I was looking for Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, because I had just read that like last year, and it was kind of fresh in my mind, and I really liked that book, and I have some ideas about it. So I was looking through my Penguins, looking for it, and I stumbled across Clark Ashton Smith, The Dark Eidolon and Other Fantasies. And so, of course, I grabbed this one because it's Clark Ashton Smith. Sorry, Charles Dickens, you're going to have to wait till another day. Listen, Clark Ashton Smith is fantastic. And you know, when I first started this channel, I promised that I would talk about Clark Ashton Smith, and so far I have not delivered on that promise. But today, I'm going to be talking about Clark Ashton Smith because he has a fantastic Penguin classic right here. Clark Ashton Smith was born January 13th, 1893, and he passed away August 14th, 1961. He spent almost all of his life in Auburn, California, just outside the town. He built a cabin all by himself because Clark Ashton Smith was multi-talented. He wrote most of his stories for Weird Tales. He was one of the big three of Weird Tales, along with H.P. Lovecraft, and Robert E. Howard. One of the big three, and he is probably somehow the least famous of the three of them. And he's a fantastic writer. I think he's probably every bit as talented in his own way as those writers were. At least he's close. It's pretty hard to touch Lovecraft, but he's close. And like Robert E. Howard, he was pen pals with H.P. Lovecraft. They used to write back and forth to each other. They were big fans of each other. They referenced each other in their work, which is always cool. Yeah, and you'll find that. You'll read H.P. Lovecraft and his stories, and you'll find references to the creatures that you'd find in Clark Ashton Smith. And that's always kind of cool when you stumble across something like that. Now, Clark Ashton Smith was another guy that spent most of his life in crippling poverty. He never had much money. He never made much money. He was never famous really while he was alive. He gained a tiny bit of fame locally for his poems, but not too much. He is mostly known, even today, by connoisseurs of weird fiction and horror fiction and fantasy, classic fantasy. Those of us who are into those things, we certainly know the name Clark Ashton Smith. But certainly, I think most of the reading public have probably never heard of him at all, or if they've heard of him, they've just kind of heard of him in passing and have never read his work. And that's a real shame. This guy could write. He started off his career as a poet, and he probably always was really a poet at heart. His poetry is beautiful, just majestic and incredible, his poetry. And this volume here has some of his poetry in it. We can owe this volume to critic and editor S.T. Joshi. Yes, the S.T. Joshi who did so much work with H.P. Lovecraft and edited all those Penguin Lovecraft volumes. He also did this volume, and I think he pushed for it, I'm pretty sure. And I'm glad he did. This guy, Clark Ashton Smith, he is a classic writer. He deserves to have a Penguin Classic. In my opinion, he deserves to be in the Library of America because he was that talented. The poetry that he wrote was gorgeous, and that kind of poetic language made its way into his stories. And his stories, man, his stories were something else. He wrote these magical, crazy, otherworldly fantasies that are unlike any other fantasies that you'll read. And he wrote some of the most bone-chilling, gruesome, disturbing horror stories that you'll ever read. This particular story that I read from, The Vaults of Yo Von Bees, until I picked up this volume, somehow I had never read that story. And when I read that story, man, it blew me away because that story is terrifying. I mean, it is just awful in its horribleness. I mean, just scary as all hell. I mean, this story, man, it is as scary as any modern story you can come up with, and certainly as disturbing. That is a disturbing story. Starts off as a kind of science fiction, archaeology kind of story, and then just goes south real quick, man. That story is great. That story is worth the price of this volume all by itself. And there are a bunch of other really great stories in here. So S.T. Joshi, he only had like 360 pages to play around with in this volume. So he didn't have a lot of room. And considering that, he has put in this book just a ton of great stories that are representative of all the different kinds of stories that Clark Ashton Smith did. He did fantasies, he did just straight up horror stories, he did science fiction, he did kind of like ghostly stories. This guy did a lot, and he published a lot of stories in Weird Tales, most of which nowadays most people have not read, which is, like I said, a real shame. And he also, on top of that, S.T. Joshi managed to put in some of his just fantastic poems. And believe me, they are fantastic. One story that's in here, which is his famous story, is the Hashish Eater, or the Apocalypse of Evil. And that's just beautiful. Allow me to melodramatically read. Bow down. I am the Emperor of Dreams. I crown me with the million-colored sun of secret worlds incredible, and take their trailing skies for vestment when I soar, throned on the mounting zenith, and illume the spaceward flown horizon infinite. Like rampant monsters roaring for their glut, the fiery crested oceans rise and rise, by jealous moon maleficently urged to follow me forever. Mountains horned with peaks of sharpest adamant, and mawed with sulphur-lit volcanoes lava-languined, usurp the skies with thunder, but in vain. And continents of serpent-shapen trees, with slimy trunks that lengthened league by league, pursue my flight through ages spurned to fire by that supreme ascendance, sorcerers and evil kings, predominantly armed with scrolls of fulvious dragon skin, whereon are worm-like ruins forever twisting flame. It's just, and it just goes on like that of pure awesomeness. I mean, this guy could write, Clark Ashton Smith. And really, more people should know about this guy. Just an immeasurable talent. This is an easy way to read Clark Ashton Smith. It's a Penguin classic. You can get your hands on it. And it's beautiful and magical and horrifying and just wonderful. Clark Ashton Smith, an underrated writer. Before I go, I want to read, yes, I'm going to read some more, a little thing that Ray Bradbury, the great, great Ray Bradbury, wrote about Clark Ashton Smith. Smith always seemed, to me anyway, a special writer for special tastes. His fame was lonely. Whether or not it will ever be more than lonely, I cannot say. I'm hoping his fame won't always be lonely, and that more people will come to appreciate Clark Ashton Smith. So that is your Sunday Penguin for today. Clark Ashton Smith, The Dark Eidolon, and Other Fantasies. So I hope to see you once again tomorrow for Mythos Monday, where I talk about The Call of Cthulhu by H.P. Lovecraft, here at stately Vaughan Manor. Bye, guys.